Alright champs, she's up and running, a lot quieter, a lot more stable, sounding good. As is a theme at Brad's Guitar Garage, there was more to it than expected. So we'll start from the front. Power switch was reading somewhere between 200 and 800 ohms when it was turned on, depending on, you know, which time you flicked it and where the moon was in alignment with Venus. So we replaced that with a new carling. Replaced the mains cord as we discussed in the last one. Just got a proper molded plug now with a safety end on it, and wired that. We wired it as good as we can, considering the fuse is in here and the mains input's in here. We couldn't go straight to fuse. We had to go switch then fuse, unless we drilled a hole in here and remounted a fuse in there and removed that. Yeah, there's a bit of a grandfather clause on this one because it is so old. But what I did do is remove the fraying rubber grommets and put proper Heyco clips on there that actually retain the cord on there and down where it exits there. They were just rubber grommets before. So working our way along, there's our new plate resistor that was open circuit. There's our new bypass cap, another bypass cap, another bypass cap. We kept the values the same because I wanted this thing to sound like it is, like keep its character. Full recap. So there's all the power supply caps. I lifted that one to 30 microfarad from 22. That's still within the tolerance of a 5Y3, but just reduces the ripple a touch, and the ripple did come down by about half with that increase of value, as well as just a new fresh cap in there, so that's good. We had some issues with getting high enough current for the EL34s to idle above, say, 40%. This is a cathode biased amp, so ideally we'd hit 95. The voltage was just sagging like crazy, so I replaced that 5Y3 with a Sovtech, which most guys in the game will know that they probably aren't a true 5Y3. They pump out a fair bit more voltage than the JJ's one, or, you know, the equivalent older ones. So that allowed us to get up to like 80%, so I'm going to call it there because it is a pretty tightly enclosed cabinet. Not a lot of airflow, so I don't want to go really pushing the envelope too hard there. Put a new dropper in there. That's only dissipating about 2.5 watts. That's a 5-watt resistor, so that's within, you know, the range that we should be designing it. Put some backup diodes on the rectifier, so if that rectifier ever does go short, they'll kick in instead, and you won't blow up the caps with AC. Flyback diodes. Installed a few on the valves, directly on the valve sockets there, just if there ever is a blown speaker, because this speaker is only rated at, say, 20 watts, and this thing's putting out about 25, so if it ever does blow the speaker, or if just someone pulls it out of the back, you won't have a flyback event, and you won't damage the output transformer and arc the sockets and destroy valves and everything. They will limit the inductive kick that the transformer will throw back if it's operated without a load. I installed some fusible heater balance resistors there. There were previously some down here. I removed them and installed them over here because I want to take advantage of the cathode voltage on the output and elevate them by that, because that will help with it, the heater hum in the preamp. I've settled on 250 ohms for the cathode resistor, and I installed a bypass cap just to get a little bit more solid bottom end, as it's very subtle, it barely makes a difference, but it does reduce the hum a bit as well, which is nice. That resistor there was the feedback resistor. I just re-terminated that properly. Just any dodgy solder joints and whatever I redid. There's another cap down there. Wherever they're sitting against the chassis, well, all of them are silicon to the chassis, so they're not just holding on, rattling around by their leads like the old ones were. So down here in the preamp, replaced all 4 sockets. Got new switchcrafts in there with the new resistors on them. It's with everything in this thing wrapped 100 times around each eyelet. It was pretty difficult to try and save any components because you'd often snap the leads trying to unwrap them, and it was just really, each joint to rework took like 2 to 3 minutes instead of 2 to 3 seconds, and that's what happens when you do the bullshit supposed mil spec wiring where everything's wrapped around a million times just to get one component out. You got to get in there and try and wick away all that solder and pry the shit away, and it's all tangled up over each other. Back in the day, it lended itself to assembling everything and then going through and just soldering everything in one go, because everything was more or less held in place, but for repair it's a pain in the ass. So the sockets took quite a bit of cleaning to get to behave themselves, as well as the pins. There was flux had run down inside the sockets, so I had to do several cleaning cycles, as well as getting in there with a toothpick and then also scotch brighting the pins of the valves. And all the valves came good except for the EL34s. They were heavily out of balance, so that last clip would have sounded okay-ish, but it wasn't great for hum either. So I swapped them out with a new set of piss vanes, because who doesn't love a good piss vane? And as discussed, got the new 5Y3 in there. Now all the pots cleaned up quite a bit better, but there's still a bit there. But it's not like you're sitting there playing the thing going like this. So if it really bothers him, I can say, look, we can replace the pots, but you're probably looking at another, 2-3 hours labour, probably 3-4 hours labour with all these wraparound connections and shit, plus the cost of the pots. So I think diminishing returns, just don't sit there doing this while you're playing it, and you're sweet. So I've got to glue down some of this vinyl before I put them back in there, put the chassis back in the cab. I've tested the reverb, it works now. That's beauty. Speaker's good, sounds a little thin actually. The 12 PEG I said in the previous video was a good speaker for guitar. I'm pretty sure it is a guitar speaker, but I think the ones that Dad has are the hi-fi ones, and they've got a bit more bottom end to them, whereas this one just sounds a little bit thin, but top end's okay, nice and smooth. Just removed all the knobs as well, gave the front panel a good clean, and cleaned the knobs and put them back on. They're all sweet still. Alright, she's back in the cab. Like I said in the first video, everything's just super cheap on these things. Chipboard and stuff falling apart, flathead screws that are like barely half an inch long, and split chipboard. I've glued the Tolex or vinyl, whatever it is, back in place. Come on, Penny boy, focus. It's focusing on the wall back there. It loves that wall. Anyway, so yeah, this one wasn't important enough to get a serial number, unfortunately. I guess that's the serial number there. Yeah, so it's all just flathead screws with cup washers. But the overall look of the thing's not too bad. It visually looks pretty cool from the front, and everything lines up, and it's got pretty new sockets there, so yeah. The grain of this stuff was particularly hard to clean. It's a very deep sort of grain to it. So yeah, I gave that a few cleans, and that's about as good as it's going to get, unfortunately. But gave the front a slight wash as well. That's brightened it a little bit, but yeah, it's got charm. It's got charm, don't we all?
you.